All right, so it looks like it's right at 12 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Meredith Wardell. I'm the marketing manager here at Clear Technologies, and we once again want to thank you for joining us. We're excited to partner with Service Express on today's webinar. We do have Stephen Conrad and Chad Peters with Service Express here today to present. And then we also have Mark Reynolds, our VP of Sales, who's going to start us out with a quick overview of Clear Technologies. Everyone is on mute today, and if you have questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat box. We will get to those at the very end with a Q&A session, and so we'll be monitoring that as the webinar goes on. And our webinar is being recorded today, so if you want to reference that back at any time, we will have that available after the event. As I mentioned in the invitation, we do have 3 exciting prizes today for our participants. So we're giving away a Sonos Roam speaker, a Vine box, and a $50 gift card. So we will do our prize drawing at the webinar today, and we'll notify our prize winners this afternoon. So we'll kick things over to Mark. Mark, sorry, get us started.
All right, thanks, Meredith. And again, thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us. And again, we're excited about the presentation, and thank you to the Service Express team for assisting us in the presentation today. I want a lot of your time. I know the Service Express folks are the stars of the show today, but just wanted to give you a real quick intro on Clear up here with the third-party maintenance presentation. 27 years now, primarily focused on hardware, so your server, storage, networking gear. Based out of the Dallas, Texas area, actually in Addison, Texas. Now, big partnership with IBM, but as you can see across the bottom, get our hands in just about every manufacturer out there: Dell, EMC, Nutanix, HPE, and Pure, and have a real strong focus on the hardware sales side of it. The big differentiator for us and what makes us different from a lot of the other VARs out there is the right side of the screen, as you can see, is our intellectual property visual storage intelligence. It's a storage resource management as a service tool. It allows you to look at your entire storage environment, all the way down from your storage arrays down to your virtual machines, and get really a heterogeneous look at all your arrays and your entire environment on one pane of glass. Most of the manufacturers out there have their own reporting tools. A lot of them are 7-figure tools that require a lot of team members to maintain that. We take all that out of your hands, do a lot of the reporting for you, get you a weekly update on that, and allows it to have one person really to be the admin for it, and usually about a third of the cost. We saw a huge spike in our business during COVID. People were being asked to do more with less, trying to keep gear out there longer. We actually had a cost containment offer where we offered VSI for free for a majority of the year during COVID to help people avoid storage purchases, unneeded storage purchases. I know that sounds kind of counterproductive for a company that tries to sell hardware, but we were being asked by our customers and driven to really help them find money in their budget, and to help them keep that gear out there longer and avoid those big capital expenditures and try to look a little bit more OpEx. So we were able to use that tool to help them keep their environment out there longer, keep a lot of their storage arrays out there, and find capacity within their current environment to help them not have those unneeded expenditures. And it kind of brings us into the discussion we're having today. So as a reseller, you try to put yourself with premier partners out there. This one is pretty near and dear to my heart. I was actually a Service Express member of the family for about 5 years in my previous career before coming to Clear. And Chad is one of my favorite people there, so I'm happy to see him doing the presentation today. But our clients are coming to us and asking us to help them find ways, again, to save money. And what a better way than helping them with that gear and bringing in a premier service from Service Express that's going to them better, and usually help them save 30, 50, some cases 70%. So I'm not going to steal most of Service Express's thunder. But that's Clear in a nutshell, and love to have some more discussions with you guys afterwards. See if we can help you guys find ways to cut some costs inside your environment as well. So with that, again, I appreciate y'all's time today, and I will kick it over to Chad and Steve and the Service Express team to take it from here.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark. And let me just kind of recue a screen share real quick. I think all of us now are pretty well versed in the inner work here. Thanks, Mark, for inviting us on. And yeah, as Mark mentioned, Mark and I had a chance to work together for a few years at Service Express, got to know each other really well. So you can see from the so just a quick, super brief intro of been in the data center maintenance space for nearly 30 years. Our goal really is to partner with customers to find that best fit solution. There's a few things. Reduces the overall spend, help improve some of the CapEx and OpEx budgets and funds there. And at the same time, improving that quality and level of service that they are receiving. Really what we do in a nutshell, our main focus is in that storage network space. And when we think about kind of who we are, so as Mark mentioned, I'm Chad Peters, the Director of Infrastructure Solutions at Service Express. I've been here for I just turned 25 at Service Express just last month. So I've been with Service Express for a very long time, not quite since day one, but certainly since the early days. So I've had a lot of time to kind of grow with our customers and the industry, see the changes, see the trends. And what my main focus and goal is today and beyond is what my team does is we really bring in insights and data to our customers to help them really navigate the waters of data center maintenance and refresh cycles, and really kind of pull back the curtain and help educate by using data points to really help customers extend their product life, usability, and find that best fit service provider to help really enhance that service that they are receiving. Today I brought with me Stephen Conrad. So Stephen, I'll let you do a quick intro of yourself and what you do here at Service Express.
Yeah, very briefly, I don't have the Service Express experience that Chad has. I just crossed my 1 year mark with Service Express, so very young in my tenure. But I'm on the sales team, specifically on the Red River team. So basically the accounts that I'm partnering with are mainly headquartered in Houston, Dallas, and Austin as well. So I partner with Chad's team for technical expertise within the sales process. And then after the partnerships have been established, continuing to work with those customers and helping them achieve their key initiatives, as you can see.
Perfect. Awesome. So our real focus, as I mentioned, is to take the next several minutes with all of you. And as I alluded to at the title of our presentation, Sprint or Marathon. So a little bit in jest, I don't know how many of you that are on the webinar today are avid runners, but for me personally, I'm a long distance runner. Now, for true long distance runners, they probably would disagree. They probably would say that Chad is not a long distance runner to the standards that maybe they're at. But I certainly try. And as you think about running a long race, a marathon, an ultra, you can't just lace up the tennis shoes, jump out the car and hit the trail and off you go. You can, but probably somewhere along the way, you're going to fall over. So it takes preparation. And you have to get ready to go do it. You've got to practice, you've got to train, you have to know the course. You have to, make sure that you are ready to go. Well, that's not that similar when we think about managing a data center. You can't walk in and go, cool, I'm here. I'm gonna go do some maintenance, buy some stuff, and we're gonna have a data. There's a lot going on within the data center that we have to lean into. And there are some obstacles that are in our way and some challenges that we have to address. So our goal today is to kind of help you navigate this course. While it may not be a marathon, it still is going to take some work and preparation. And we're going to focus today on some of the things that all of us have to experience. And that is maximizing uptime. If you're managing the data center, if you're a CIO, you get it. You got to have your customers. Well, us in the data center maintenance space, we also want uptime. We don't want things to be down either. Security. I mean, look at the news over the last month. I think every week we have some kind of data breach happening to some organization somewhere. So we all know that improving security in the data center and on the systems is critical. Optimizing operations. How can we do things better than we did yesterday and more effectively and more efficiently? And then, of course, the one thing that we love and hate revolves around budgeting. How do we get the right budget in place? How do we meet the demands of the budget, do the right things that still maximize the usability for our customers? So all those things kind of factor in when we think about our goals in the data center. Along with that, we've got to figure out, when do we refresh things? How do we do maintenance? If we are going to leverage OEM maintenance, what does that look like to us? Is that getting more expensive as the years go on? Is it flexible enough to meet our demands? And then what has service looked like for us, leveraging the OEM? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? So those are all the things that we're going to lean into as we begin to navigate this course this afternoon. So I'll kind of pause there for a second. Stephen, anything you would like to add to that? Anything that I missed?
No, I think you hit everything. I think really, the focus today initially is just, is it a product-based partnership or a service-based partnership? And I think that's where you're going to see the differentiators and really the value add from a third-party perspective.
Perfect. Well, one of the first things that Stephen and I want to lean into is kind of talk about just traditional timelines. And I know that it won't be the case for everyone all the time, and things will vary and shift based on the product and that sort of thing. But we'll kind of open it up with just what we typically see or hear as we're engaging with customers like yourselves. So for example, we think about when we buy equipment, day one when we buy it, generally speaking, what typically happens, and again, I know there are differences to this, but what typically happens is we bring the equipment in, it is bundled with some type of OEM warranty or maintenance from the OEM, generally for that first 3 years, right? 1 to 3 years, we have that, typically 3. At the end of that 3 years, I kind of hit my first decision point in the data center. Usually I get some kind of trigger from the OEM that might do something like an end of life or end of sales notification saying, hey, we're done selling this. You should look at the next thing. So I have a choice there. Do I go refresh? Do I refresh now and go right back into that kind of 3-year cycle? Hit 3 years, I go buy new, I'm back in 3 years with a manufacturer warranty. So that's kind of our first decision point in a typical timeline. If we decide to not refresh and extend maintenance with the OEM, well, then I'm probably going to see an uptick in maintenance costs as I do that. That's kind of the first thing that happens. Or I can choose to maybe leverage a third-party maintenance provider. Now, later on, we're going to talk about some of the risk reward of that, some of the obstacles and decisions we have to make if we're going to branch off and go down a TPM track. The bottom line, after that warranty is up, I've got to make some kind of decision. If I decide to extend the maintenance on the product and I don't refresh, and maybe I extend with the OEM, well, then I'm probably going to experience an uplift in maintenance charge. And then I hit another kind of decision point, right? I get to the end of 6 years, and now I'm faced with another decision point, another trigger from the OEM, which might be in the form of an end of service life notification. So I got kind of the gentle nudge earlier that said, we're done selling it. Now I get kind of the more aggressive nudge saying, oh, by the way, now we're done servicing it. So now as in the data center, I've got to make a choice. Do I now go down a TPM track? Do I now refresh? And then as I get to 9 to 12 years, now I truly am making a choice. If I'm hanging on to that product, I am really making a choice to leverage TPM. At this point, I've kind of run the OEM options as far as they can run, and now I'm really leaning into a TPM space. So what we're going to talk about today is most of us already live in the dark blue. Like, that's kind of where we start. And a lot of us live in the light blue and then kind of go back to the dark blue. Like, that's kind of what we've been doing. What we're going to talk about today is how do we lean a little more into kind of that yellow and orange space. Like, when does that make sense to do that? And then what are some things we have to discuss when we're going to do that? So that's kind of really the focus there that we're gonna kind of hit on as we continue to talk this afternoon.
I think going back to one of my previous, as you move your way towards the right, and as the kind of the lifespan, kind of continues on, you're going to see a perspective change from the OEM as it pertains to service, because they're trying to paint you into a corner to refresh and buy new gear. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and I call them triggers. They are somewhat artificial, because they are driven by the manufacturer, right? They can set those dates to what they want. It doesn't mean, and I always like to discuss this, and we all realize this, it doesn't mean at the end of 3 years, if I don't refresh, the machine explodes, right? Of course not. It's going to keep working for me. It doesn't mean at the end of 6 years that the thing just shuts off. Of course it doesn't. It just means those are triggers that are put in our path to get us to decide on something. Decide to continue to own the product and extend its life, or decide to refresh the product and kind of start back at that far left again. So to take us through some traditional life cycles, I think in a lot of data centers, this is what we think happens. This is like, hey, yeah, refresh every 3 years. Like, that's what we do. I buy new, I run it, I refresh it, I get rid of the old, and I keep doing this. Like,
never have any budget issues, always
right. Never have any obstacles in our way. That's just that's our model, right? That's the model we leverage. Well, I think for most of us on the call today, that may not be quite this long, but I think for a lot of us on the call today, we kind of realize we're somewhere probably closer to here, that we're probably not refreshing 100% of the data center every 3 years. Don't get me wrong, there are probably pieces that are getting refreshed, but we're probably running a little longer. Whether we wanted to or didn't want to, we're probably running a little longer to that 5 and 6 year window. Now, the fun part, what I would suggest, and we're going to talk more about this in a few minutes, what I would suggest that we do is stretch a little longer, go 7, 8 years with it. Because when we think about it, why am I refreshing, right? Why am I buying new? Am I being triggered to do so because of an end of life, end of sale notification? Am I being triggered to do so because of end of service from the OEM? That's certainly valid, those do happen. Am I refreshing because it truly isn't performing for me? I know one of those is a great reason to lean in and refresh, right? If it's truly not meeting my business needs, yeah, let's look at upgrade or refresh. That makes a lot of sense. But you know what? If I'm being triggered because they don't sell it anymore, or because it's being end of service by the OEM, there might be other things that I can lean into, other options that I can leverage. Now, with those options certainly come questions and challenges. And that's where we're going to shift our focus and talk about now, is share some information with you from what we've heard, what we've researched, and what we discussed with other customers like you. When we think about getting to that point of, do I want to bring in a third-party provider? And that can sometimes be a scary decision. I've had the OEM, I refresh every 3 years, I keep the warranty with them, I might extend a few more years with them, but bottom line, I'm leveraging the OEM and it's working. Now you're saying, should I, can I lean in and leverage a third-party provider to bring service into this? Well, typically there are a few things we have to talk about, and more so, what are the impacts? So, what kind of disruption either am I experiencing already with the OEM by doing that kind of 3-year refresh? What disruption or limitations might I experience if I go to a TPM? What's the impact on the budget either way? And then timing. When I refresh, when should I refresh? And so we're going to share some examples of some timing of what makes sense from at least a server standpoint. I know storage is a little different, and networking as well, but we'll give you some examples from a server side. And then lastly, risk management. right? If I'm deciding to do something different, what are the risks that I'm going to incur? And usually the biggest risk we think about is if I'm going to hang on, right? If Chad's telling me to hang on to it for 7 years, what happens as it gets older, right? What do I think will happen and what really happens? And so we'll talk about risk factors when it comes to reliability of the product as it ages. So these are kind of the 4 things we're going to lean into as we kind of talk about extending life and maybe leveraging TPM, or how do I best leverage a TPM moving forward. And like I said, as we're going through this, feel free to load up the chat with any questions. And like I said, we've got time blocked out at the end to address those too. So if you want to front load the chat as we're going through this with thoughts or ideas that are popping in your head, definitely do that. We've got time blocked out at the end. And of course, we'll open it up at the end for kind of an open forum for questions as well. So the first kind of reality check I wanted to lean into was disruption. And I wanted to focus mainly on firmware. So that's important. If I sit down with any customer, and we have thousands of them, and I guarantee every conversation I'm ever a part of, the number one question, concern, comment that comes up is, what does firmware access or release schedule look like for me if I leave the OEM? Like, what happens? Can I still get it? Can I not get it? How often does it come out? What are the typical things it addresses and remedies? Those are all questions and concerns that come up as you kind of approach that fork in the road to think about doing something different. Yeah, so there is a great question. I am going to hit this one question in the chat because it is there and it's very relevant to firmware. Yeah. I heard a rumor, and I love that IBM is allowing access to the firmware for power systems. Any truth to that? Yes, there's a lot of truth to that. So yeah, IBM was one of the early adopters of locking down microcode for power systems. They did that very early on, shortly after kind of Oracle Sun did that. But they gave you kind of a pay-to-play option with a special bid. But now they have opened up firmware access on select models, but they are nice enough to give you an Excel spreadsheet at the bottom of Fix Central's main page that will tell you what models have free firmware and what versions of that firmware microcode are available for free download. So yes, it has been opened up, primarily Power 7, 8, and 9. If you've got a Power 5 or 6, it doesn't really matter. You've already kind of hit into firmware life on those. But that is there and available to you. It isn't every version on every model, but it is several versions on most models. And again, they've got a spreadsheet that will outline that for you at the bottom of Fix Central's main page that you can download. So great question. I'm glad you brought that up. That fits really well into the firmware conversation. Because when you think about this, most of the time, and again, I want to be careful of saying always and never, because about the time that you do that, you're wrong. So most of the time, the fixes that address functionality and performance of your machine, whether that's server, storage, or network, generally get launched in the first few years of that machine being released. It kind of leaves the factory, it gets out in the world, people begin to use it, and oh, look at this happened. And then they issue microcode fixes to address it. Now, it doesn't mean that they'll never have a fix after 3 years, but generally speaking, you see something like this. In the first few years of production, yeah, you're getting hit with code updates fairly often, potentially monthly. Now, each time I do a code update, there's some kind of impact to me. It might be that I need to, restart, reboot the appliance in order to activate the code. Some of them can be done concurrently, but there's also risk. What if it goes wrong? What if something bad happens? As the product ages, what you typically see is you see fewer firmware fixes to address functionality and problems. You might see those come out quarterly that actually address something functionality related. What you might see, though, are fixes that address features, support a new card, support a higher capacity drive, a new version of an operating system. but you'll see fewer fixes that actually address something wrong with the hardware. OEMs, on this, OEMs do have the option, and many of them have chosen to do this, and that is to continue to release updates that impact security and safety for free. You'll see this in HPE with their ProLiance. Well, now G10s and higher, it's all free, but prior to that, they would release critical updates for free. So you will see OEMs that choose to do that. You'll see some OEMs that choose not to, but that is always an option. It's certainly something to look at as you're thinking about doing something different with your maintenance.
And so one thing I want to just quickly note, Chad, is a lot of the clients that I'm working with or I've talked to is that over time, they get into their mind that they continuously do these updates, when in reality, if they were actually go back, check the schedule of how often they're actually doing them, even when they have access to the firmware, it's actually a lot less prevalent than what they think they're doing. So always interesting to see the kind of the light bulb click in their mind of when they go back and check and see, well, I downloaded these, but did we actually install them? Or maybe we didn't even download them, so they're just kind of out in the ether. So always interesting to come up in conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Great observation. And here's just kind of a sample kind of timeline. And I know that may not be a perfect downward ski slope. You might have some ripples along the way, but traditionally this is what you would see over time. And yeah, I would say that customers that are leveraging that first few years of OEM warranty and maintenance, yeah, there's a good reason to do that, especially if firmware is entitled only. Like, you have to be with the OEM to do that. But as you can see over time, traditionally firmware that addresses true problems declines over time. I would say that will it ever hit zero? Eventually they'll stop doing it as you start to approach end of service life. But up until then, there's always an option, but it certainly goes down drastically as you start to hit years 5 and beyond. So something to think about as you're thinking about, do I leverage a TPM or not? Have that discussion about firmware and see how you're applying it today, what the impact is to the hardware that you have, and you know what, it might make sense to make a change. I think the other one that's near and dear to all of us in data center, whether it's maintenance or management, is budget. And one of the things that we're going to lean into is that actually, if you kept a product longer, that the savings you would have in maintenance, again, as you start to think about a hybrid solution leveraging a TPM, the cost savings you'd have in maintenance begins to pay for your next refresh. And that's kind of a cool thing to think about. Because if you're in that refresh loop, right, you're every 3 years I'm buying new, or every 3 to 5 years I'm buying new, you don't really ever notice that. But if you're able to kind of stretch your maintenance dollars and extend the maintenance beyond the OEM and begin to leverage other solutions like a TPM, especially as you hit that downward slope in code, either code's freely available or it's no longer an issue. Wow, that's a reason maybe to lean into a third-party provider. What you'll begin to see is now you're getting money kind of back. Normally what you would budget for, now you're kind of reaping those benefits with cost savings, and now you can leverage for other projects. It might be a refresh project or something else. So I'm going to share with you just a few quick examples of how this might play out for you. And again, I'm sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Just kind of reviewing the data center and infrastructure report that we released recently, and the two top priorities that were on that report were security and privacy, and then obviously reduction of costs and improving inefficiencies. And so this is a really good way where you can parlay both of those and lower the reduction, as well as maybe tailor a specific plan to divert those funds to a security project, or just open up the opportunity, the flexibility, I should say, to accomplish other tasks that may be not on the forefront of your mind with the expensive cost with the OEM. Absolutely.
And just some quick examples here. If we kept refreshing every 3 years, and I'm using kind of an example, a very common example of Dell PowerEdge. And again, I didn't get into like speccing these out with very specific specifications, just kind of a rough example of how it might look for you. So if you had 60 power edges that you refreshed periodically over the next 3 years, and you kept doing that for 6 years, this is kind of what your equipment spend might look like. And that won't take into account any kind of uplift on maintenance that you might have done with the OEM. If you weren't getting necessarily 24/7 coverage, and you might have to uplift some of that, that would factor into this as well. But this is basically keeping that very first example we gave of every 3 years, we're cycling through product. Well, if you take a little bit different spin on that, and you say, well, I'm going to keep the same model of using the OEM, right? That's what we're going to do. We're going to keep using the OEM to do this, but I want to just go a little longer. I want to go to 6 years before I do this. All of a sudden, I'm able to now maybe bring my equipment costs down, because maybe I'm not buying the latest and greatest brand new every time. I'm buying maybe like an N-1, like back a level. Well, now the fun part is now include TPM into that space. The equipment's still going to cost you what the equipment cost you. And, unless you're leveraging a TPM that also sells hardware, and then you might see some additional savings there, which is great if you could capitalize on that. But now you're going to see an instant hit to the maintenance cost. So now you can see that if I kept one model where I just refreshed every 3 years and bought all new, I'm paying primo dollar because I'm buying the newest thing every time. If I wait a little bit longer, stretch my dollars a little bit, still keep the OEM for maintenance, but stretch my purchase, my CapEx purchase out a little bit, maybe buy a generation back. Well, now I'm getting some savings there that I didn't see before. And then if I take it to the next level of still refresh the hardware at 6 years, but now leverage a TPM that can now save me cost on my maintenance, all of a sudden I can now begin to reap a lot of benefits from doing a model like that with my hardware. And that's really kind of one of the takeaways when it comes to budget, is to think about, what does it look like if? What does it look like today if I refresh? What's my spend look like? If I lengthen my refresh cycle and maybe buy back one generation, what does that look like? And then if I incorporate a TPM into the equation, what does that begin to look like? And now you're starting to be able to choose a different adventure throughout this, and pick something that might fit better with your overall budget needs, and then give you some money back to explore other projects that you might have in your data center. Because we all know that there's never a shortage of things to do in the data center. There's always something that you can be working on, or purchasing or investing in.
Never a dull day, that's for sure.
Right, exactly. So kind of springboarding off of this, it goes right into timing. I mentioned buying back kind of one generation. What I'm going to show you here is, if you just extend when you purchase and get very strategic about it, you can save some CapEx expense and still get the performance that you need. Because when we think about processors over time, and this is kind of I'm gonna not dive into this chart too much, but if you kind of look at this, you've got kind of peaks, and then you've got plateaus. So when you think about when to buy the next server, well, look at where you are in the peak and plateau. Are you plateauing so that you're buying at the beginning of the plateau? Like, for example, if I bought at the top of the peak, well, now I can run that system for the next several years, because I'm not going to gain that much performance bump if I bought the next generation. So that's one thing to think about, is where are you buying? Are you buying at the peak of a new generation? Are you buying in the middle of a plateau? Are you buying at the bottom of it? The peak is just getting started, so now I have to buy all the time to stay current. Or did you buy after it kind of capped out, and now it's going to run fairly flat with minor upticks for the next several years? So I think just choosing when to buy will also help you maximize that CapEx. It may not be buying the newest machine. Maybe it's buying one generation back that still gives me that performance hit that I need, but I'm not paying the premium dollars for the newest model that's out right now. Kind of like when you go car shopping, did the manufacturer make a drastic change in the body style and the feature set that's in that car? If I bought a 2018 versus a 2021, what changed? Is it still the same engine? Is it still the same body style? Do I still get all the same bells and whistles? Like, what really changed that would make me want to buy a brand new car versus a car that's a few years old? So that same concept, I think, translates well into the data center. What am I getting at brand new? What am I getting back one generation or maybe two generations? So it's not just coming on and saying, you should go to third-party maintenance. I would love it if you did. But I think it's really saying, here's some other ways to maximize your spend to save you money without doing a maintenance change. That's another piece of it that would just kind of, I guess, multiply on top of those savings. But it's also, when do I buy the next hardware, right? The next refresh. Steve, anything you want to add to that?
No, I just think this is a really interesting approach of like timing and kind of parlaying, patience that you can bring into the budget and decision making, and how it can really, impact other areas of the business that, you may not foresee in just kind of making a decision to refresh. So a little bit more of an analytical and strategic approach.
And where I wanted to spend some time out here was also risk management. All of us, myself included, right? We're all consumers of products and service. And I think all of us have a mindset that says the older something gets, the more likely it is to break. I think if you were asking anybody, whether it's a car, a house, an electronic component within the house, or data center equipment, I think we would all think that the older it gets, the more likely it is to have failures that can impact my business in a negative way. And the theory that's out there is kind of, we call the bathtub curve. This is really the perception that I think a lot of us have, is when I get the new product, I might experience some more failures at the onset, maybe fixed by firmware, like we talked about earlier. That's why there's maybe updates coming out monthly. And then the product eventually hits kind of a sweet spot, that's somewhere in that 3 to 5 year sweet spot that it doesn't break that much. And then buckle up, once I get past that, it's going to fail a whole lot. So that's the theory that's out there, is kind of this bathtub curve theory that says it's new, so it's going to fail more because we haven't worked out all the kinks, whether that's through firmware or hardware changes, engineering changes. I get to the middle where it's a little more stable, and then now I'm going to hit that kind of wear out failure phase, right, where things are going to break more often. So one of the things I wanted to share with you, as I mentioned, Service Express has been around for nearly 30 years. What we've done is captured a ton of data around maintenance and equipment lifecycle and performance. So I just want to share with you just some data that we've collected from the equipment that we have under maintenance today that kind of dispels the bathtub curve myth a little bit and gives us something I think to think about. Now, I'm not going to show you 100 different product families and models, but I will show you a few just to show you how it kind of transcends across different OEMs.
Yeah, and Chad, going back to your car analogy, I also like to use the car analogy as well, but for car tires. Say you get tires rated at 50,000 miles, and they make it to the 50,000 miles, and then once you hit 50,001, they're not going to blow out. They're going to continue going. Now they may, the tread may wear a little bit, but they're going to be well past the 50,000. So
yeah.
Don't quote me on that, just in case people have 50,000 rated tires. So, but that's typically what we see as well.
Yeah, Stephen, unless you drive a car like I do, then I don't usually always make the life expectancy of the tire. That's just me. I'm a bad driver. But here's some samples. And again, some of these products might hit home for you. You might already have these in your data center. Great if you do. But what I wanted to kind of show you is critical failure rates versus non-critical. So just to kind of do some definitions here, when we think about critical failure, things that impact the business, right? The motherboard died, the processor failed, the memory failed, something that's going to bring that machine down and impact users. So what we did here is just kind of, we went back throughout our call history and began to tell a story, and it kind of showed you over the months of this product being in service, what was the reality? And the reality was very opposite from that bathtub failure curve, or what we might think about failures. First of all, critical failures, that's not just the bottom of the chart, that's actually the line. Critical failures didn't really do anything. They stayed pretty flat throughout. So we didn't experience a higher CPU failure rate. We didn't experience motherboards failing. Things that would bring the machine down stayed pretty flat, as you can see over several months of review. The non-critical failures, so things that you have redundancies on, fans, power supplies, disk drives, what we actually saw there was a decrease in failure rate over time. Now, again, it wasn't this wild, drastic decrease. It wasn't that high to begin with as far as percent of failure, but you can see though that it goes counter to what we believe to be true. And so this is another thing to think about as you're getting into that, those triggers we talked about. Well, now we can think about, well, wait a minute, if the hardware actually isn't going to explode and fail more, can I keep it longer? Is it meeting my business needs? Can I keep it longer and now look at different solutions?
Chad, I know you mentioned how long, obviously, we've been doing this research, but just so we can kind of gauge how many. Do you have the number of how many specific models we have under support? Just
yeah, great question. So, like for example, ProLiant, I happen to have up on the screen now. We're doing something like 90,000 of these for customers, and that spans something like 10,000 maintenance calls, a year, roughly. So some never call and some do call, but that just kind of gives you a little scope, depth, and breadth of what we're looking at, and that's looking at something like overall models that are sampled as we do something like this. It's like 500,000 different pieces of equipment. But as you can see, even looking at ProLiant, which again, extremely popular industry as an Intel server, almost every data center we walk into, there's a ProLiant somewhere. And same story is told here. So we went from Cisco UCS to ProLiant, but the story really didn't change drastically. The big part of this story is the critical failures, things that bring the machine down. In this case, actually dipped a little bit over time. And the non-critical failures, you saw, again, a little bit of an uptick over time. But when you think about that, non-critical failures, might be things like, a battery failing is non-critical, right? It's not going to bring the machine down, but I have to replace it. Well, we know we got to do batteries every 3 to 5 years on cache batteries. So some of those things will also impact this. But as you can see, though, we didn't see this wild, crazy spike as time went on. That all of a sudden we hit this point in time where the wheels fell off and ProLiant fell apart. And just another quick one, extremely popular, Dell PowerEdge. So again, as you can see, not a lot of swing here with critical versus non-critical. So as we're thinking about a product getting older, we wanted to kind of dispel that myth of it's going to fail more. The reality is it doesn't. So now we have a couple of things to think about when we're going to lean in and maybe look at a different solution for maintenance beyond the OEM. Where I wanted to, I've been mentioning leveraging TPM, to extend the life of product, to help with CapEx and OpEx spend. Well, I wanted to leave you really with kind of a punch list. Here I am telling you that a TPM can fit well in your environment and help you extend the life while reducing your overall spend. What I don't want you to do is like go out and just like, I'm going to go find a TPM and we're just going to do this. Some things I would want you to do, and oh, by the way, if you called me, I would want you to ask me these things. But as you're outsourcing a TPM, if you're thinking about leaning into this, and maybe you haven't today and you want to, I would have you do some of these things, right? When you're engaging with a TPM, ask them their first trip repair rate. How often do you fix it right the first time? 90%, 50%, 100%? Like, what does that look like? And then challenge that, right? Ask some qualifying questions. If they say it's 100%, oh, cool, that's a really high number.
Pretty good.
Right? If it's, so challenge that, right? Ask those questions. When somebody says they have experienced engineers, what does that mean? Right? Have them qualify and quantify that. Local presence. Are you where I am? Do you leverage variable workforce? And if they leverage a variable workforce, what does that engagement look like? Like, if you're leveraging somebody who's not you to do maintenance, tell me a story. How does that work? How do you keep control of that? How do you, ensure quality there? What's parts sparing look like? Is it somebody selected it manually? Do you have some automation wrapped into that spares based on data analytics? Like, how do I know the right parts get on the shelf? Are there any fees I need to be aware of throughout the maintenance? If I'm adding and removing things, is there any early termination or change fees I need to know? And are you bringing value to me beyond turning off the red light? The red light comes on and says something's broken. That's great. You can turn that off. But what else are you bringing to the table to help me understand my environment? Are you going to coach me? Are you going to show me reliability studies on how my machines are performing? Are you going to help me understand when to refresh and where to spend my CapEx dollars? So be asking those questions. What does it look like beyond just maintenance? And then, of course, some things that we all want from providers: flexibility on coverage. Can I add things, remove things, get different coverage levels, SLAs? Show me who else have you done maintenance for? I want to hear from them.
And then one thing I want to say, Chad, it just goes back to the flexibility of coverage is inevitably, we have clients who want to refresh into a different OEM. And so there might be a time period where there's specific pieces of gear that are uncovered, but, critical to the business in, continuity. So again, TPM can be that bridge and stopgap coverage to that new gear where, highly unlikely that another OEM is going to be super flexible when they know that you're going to be moving off of that gear. So another good resource.
Yeah. And then, engineers, that's great. They're experienced. What's the ratio look like? If I call them, can they actually get here? Are they managing 150 accounts? Are they managing 20? What does that look like to make sure they can meet my SLA demands and needs for my customers? And bad things are going to happen. I'll just tell you that. I guarantee over the time of your maintenance experience, whether it's with the OEM or TPM, something is not going to go right. That's the reality of maintenance. What does that look like? What escalation is in place for that TPM to remedy that as quickly as possible and put some stop gaps in to make sure that same thing doesn't happen again? And then lastly, what resources are available to me? Is there a portal I can leverage to manage my infrastructure, log tickets, see the progression of ongoing tickets, monitoring of my machine? So when something breaks, it calls you and opens a ticket. What does all that look like? Or is it always I got to pick up the phone and call? Like, what are my options in engaging you? And then what other resources are you bringing to the table to help impact your service and my experience as a customer? So I know that was kind of a mouthful of a checklist, but again, as you're looking at TPM, if this has kind of piqued your interest, I would ask you to do these things. And oh, by the way, if you picked up the phone and called me, I would hope you ask me these things too. Or if you talk to Steven, I hope you ask him these things as well. So again, we kind of did our marathon, even though we did it somewhat like a sprint. We covered a lot of things very quickly. What I'd like to do, I'll turn it back over to Meredith to kind of close us out and kind of open up our Q&A if there are any Q&A pieces we want to hit, and begin to kind of wind down our time together. So thank you for, I guess, listening to me and Steven go on for a bit.
Mainly you. You're the Batman to me being Robin, so that's all. It's all good.
Perfect.
Well, we so appreciate you guys joining us today, and that was an excellent presentation, and I love the checklist. I think that's so important, so thank you for sharing that. So we will open it up for questions. We already had one great question, so if anyone has questions, you can enter them into the chat box, or if you want to unmute yourself, you may do that as well. So you'll go ahead and do that now. As we're waiting on that, any other questions you guys have gotten recently that you think are important, or any other additional tips?
I think for me, I think that IBM one is huge, Chad. I think that's going to be a big game changer for third-party maintenance and Service Express in particular.
Yeah,
kind of going off of that, I think the firmware question, there's no straight answer, and I think that's where the consultative approach comes in. Is that really looking at the gear, knowing what's important, and it's not just, hey, here, quote this, and hopefully we can be a resource. It's really what's best for the company as a whole.
Yeah, I would say the one thing that we try to avoid, is we don't want to get into the race to the bottom for cost. Really, we want to come along and make sure that what you're buying is meeting your needs. I think the worst thing we could ever do is try to get into a race to the bottom. You sign because it was cheaper, but then we get into it and it's not the best fit for either organization. So I think the checklist really helps start to poke holes in that and really understand how we fit together, because it may not be 100% of the data center is the right fit. And that's okay. Let's just understand that. But yeah, I would say the top probably 3 things that we are typically asked when we engage with customers looking at a third-party solution is, what happens with firmware access? Is it still available? Is it not available? Do I need to worry about it? There's that whole conversation that we lean into. I would say it's our first chip fix rate. That's great. You tell me you can do it, but prove it. And then how many are you already doing? That you tell me you can come out and maintain this, but are we your first one? Do you already have 1,000 of them? Like, what does it look like? I think those kind of become our short list of things that we're asked often, beyond questions like flexibility, geography, part sparing, those types of things.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, with that, if you guys are good, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. Like I said, we do have those 3 great prizes, so we will do a drawing here offline and get back to you on if you won. We'll let you know this afternoon. So again, thank you, Chad. Thank you, Stephen. Really great presentation. I think we're all eager to learn more about Service Express now. So I really appreciate your time, and thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.